Welcome to the Projector Podcast. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Editor-in-Chief of Projector Central. On this week's episode, Sammie Prescott joins us from Colorado Springs to discuss his recent review of the Valerion VisionMaster Max projector. Earning our highly recommended badge, this long-awaited 4K DLP projector is the flagship model in the VisionMaster Lifestyle projector lineup, offering the highest level of performance in that series. Building on the features and strengths of its smaller siblings, the $5,000 Max introduces standout features such as iris, motorized vertical lens shift, and enhanced contrast performance. Following the strong showing of the VisionMaster Pro 2, as noted in our review in March 2025, the Max has been positioned to surpass the Pro 2's performance, further fueling excitement for its release. How did it measure up? Here to offer insights into his firsthand experience testing the Valerion VisionMaster Max is Sammie Prescott. Welcome back to the podcast, Sammie.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
You know, you've been super busy and it's been hard to get you on a podcast. I don't want to take too much of your time because you've been traveling and you need to get you back to your day job today. So we're going to kind of jump right in. What I wanted to start with was the Valerion, I feel like, is one of the most well-marketed brands in the projector category. I kind of came into this category specifically a year ago, and right out of the gate, this is like the one everyone wanted to talk about. They build anticipation of a new model like no other brand that I know of. Are there any other projector brands out there that you think do that better than the Valerion in your experience?
I mean, all projectors do pretty well when it comes to their marketing. So like if Sony releases a new projector, it's generally, going to be kind of a big deal. Same thing with JVC is going to be, kind of a big deal. So like everyone has a little bit of hype behind it when they announce something. This is a little different though. I would think that it has a very strong or vocal and enthusiastic community behind it. So that kind of helped accelerate people's knowledge of it. And it has some impressive specifications for it when you start looking at things like price performance, based off some of their like claims. So I think they're probably one of the stronger ones. But everyone does have a little bit of hype behind it, but this probably a little bit more so than others. And I think it was really just due to the specifications.
That's fair. Yeah, and I get what you're saying about the Sonys and the JVCs. I mean, those are big brand names that people stand behind and like. So this is just, I think, from more of that upstart, newer brand kind of recognition. But one of the things I do think that really stands out about it, that's a fair point, beyond that price performance aspect you mentioned, is the aesthetic of it. It just has a really interesting industrial design. It looks a lot like its predecessor, the Pro 2, but it's different, right? There's a little difference in size and measurements.
Yeah, it's a little bit bigger. I think it weighs just a little bit more, but aesthetically, like design wise, it's roughly the same, except for like you have more of like a piano type black finish, on the front and the back. Still has a little door, so like the power is still behind the door and whatnot. This one has the ability to do an interchangeable lens once they actually release that and sell that. But overall, like they look the same.
Yeah. I love that picture of it, which we'll run in our background here, that with it on the that's sort of stand, the tall leg stand, the tripod. That's a really cool look. I don't know, how often that would be used, but it looks good in pictures. It spec'd at 3,500 ISO lumens from its RGB triple laser light source. How did it test out with your ANSI lumens measurements?
Okay, so it came close, but only when you start doing things like the brightness enhancer. Once you start turning that on, I mean, the image is going to get like really green. Obviously, it's not something that's really usable or watchable. Um, but it was like 3421 ANSI. And then once you start to go lower, so that's if you had it in high. But if you go to like brightness enhancer low, it's like around 3000 lumens. And if you go to um, brightness enhancer off, it's more around a 2500 lumen projector.
Mm.
Um, so it's not, it meets the spec based off of what they claim, um, but only in those circumstances of using like brightness enhancer. Once you're not using that, it's not as bright as people are going to believe. It's actually roughly, it's a little bit brighter than the Pro 2, but it is similar. It is very similar to the Pro 2 in that regard, because
So
the Pro 2 behaved the same way.
you mentioned the green bias. Is that something that you, as a discerning reviewer, is obvious to your eye, or do you think that your average consumer who's a big fan of Valerian, is that something that they just couldn't live with? The skin tones just wouldn't be right, or
Where I mean, everything wouldn't be right, and
everything's
it's
wrong.
not. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not something that you need to measure. Like, it is visible. Like, it's
Okay.
visibly noticeable that everyone would see it. As to someone's acceptance or tolerance of it, is somewhat going to be a personal taste. Like, some people might put this in a completely white room with a bunch of windows and a bunch of light and turn it on that, and they might be completely fine. Um, so like green is a natural luminant, so it's easiest for us to see.
Yeah.
So if something has, and this is white or black, if you have a hint of green in something, it's easier for our eyes to pick up, versus like if you have a hint of red, it's still easy to pick up, but it's harder than green. And if you have a hint of blue, it's harder because of how we perceive blue.
Mm.
Um, so any green in an image is going to be noticeable. And it is very, very, very noticeable when you do this. When you put it in like brightness enhancer high, yeah, it's not really what I would consider usable.
Okay. So when you see that, you feel like it is really to help meet the spec,
Yeah.
or yeah, because even in the bright room, it's just not going to be a good option.
I
For
don't,
that.
yeah, no, I don't think so. Now, some people might not be as bothered by it. Some people, for instance, like a certain percentage out of men, specifically men, are somewhat red green colorblind. So, like, if you're deficient in green, it's not going to be as offensive. You'll still probably see it, but like it may not bother them as much. That's why some people, for instance, like how it might, not how it might, how it will color shift. The reason some people don't see it is because they're red green colorblind. Um, so there's a lot of things that might make it okay for some people, but I don't think most people would use it that way.
Okay. No, it's got the TI Texas Instruments 0.47-inch DMD DLP chipset, and uses the RGB triple laser, as I said before, for the light source. Technically, it's a 1080p projector, but it uses pixel shifting to achieve the full UHD 4K resolution of 8.29 million pixels. So visually, when you're testing this out, how did you find the sharpness and details of the projected image of the Max?
It's extremely sharp. It really is, and that's what just one of the things or benefits of DLP. DLPs are just sharp in general, and pixel shifting has gotten so good that even if it's not native 4K, outside of looking at like some test patterns, you're not going to like pixel peeping and looking at test patterns. You're probably not going to be able to notice.
Okay.
So in terms of sharpness and like clarity and detail, it's fine. It's extremely sharp.
Slight rainbow effect because of the DLP. You're prone to that. You see that on certain
Yeah,
content.
yeah, and that's going to be dependent on some people. Some people can't see rainbows. Some people can. Um, I can see them, and even if it's something that has very minimal rainbows, there's certain things that you can do or display that will kind of introduce them or cause you to see them. So yeah, most single chip DLPs all have a rainbow because it has to display the color sequentially because it's a single chip. Um, so even though people are like, well, it's an RGB laser and why does it have rainbow? Well, it's a single chip. So it has to display color sequentially. So that's how rainbows occur. Um, so yeah, I see them. It's not awful, but it is noticeable. For instance, I was doing some testing down here. My wife came downstairs and she was just kind of standing in the back and she was looking at it. Um, and she noticed it, and
Mm.
just off of like little lights. Like I think that's when I was watching La La Land, and it was towards the end of the movie, and you could see them off of the little lights that were in
Mm.
the bar, and she noticed it right away. Now it does have their RBE reduction that you can turn
Mm-hmm.
on, and it does help, and it actually does work, but it also creates like this kind of high pitch whine. Like it's a noise that it creates when it does it.
Interesting.
And at that point, at least for where I had it set, I could hear it very, very well. And it just became a question of would I rather deal with the rainbows or would I rather listen to this? And it's like I just rather deal with the rainbows because that was super annoying noise. So
I wonder what that is, because when you set on a high brightness level, sometimes the fan kicks in and it causes more of a audio issue. I wouldn't imagine that's what's happening there. It's not a fan
no,
noise.
yeah,
It's
no,
something else mechanical.
it wasn't like the fan kicking up and spinning like really high. This was like almost kind of like a
Some sort of a
squeal kind of whine,
processor.
almost like a coil whine type noise.
Huh. Okay.
When it was operating, it's very distinct. Like if someone turns it on and they listen for it, they will probably hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it could just be unit to unit variance. Maybe
Mm.
my unit has it, maybe others may not. I'm not sure, but I did hear like a specific tone when it was turned on.
We mentioned a couple of differences between the Pro 2 and this model. And one of them that you mentioned in the article is the increased optical zoom range.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was created some more options for where you can place this. So thinking like how you get it out of your earshot, but not quite far enough probably to make that useful. You said it was pretty limited range.
Yeah, it's still limited range. I mean, at its heart, it's still a lifestyle projector, and it still has
Front of
a
the
short
room
throw.
kind of
Yeah,
situation.
it's
Yeah.
still so like with the Pro 2 or even the Max, it's either like right in front of my seating or
Yeah.
it's just slightly behind it, but within feet. Like it is still super close. So it
Yeah.
still has the same limitations um, as other lifestyle projectors because you just have a very, very small throw. Now, if you had a
Yeah.
larger screen and you need to get it further back, that would change things. But I mean, overall, unless someone does the lens change that they're going
Yeah.
to have at a later point in time, this is not it's not a long throw projector. It just
Yeah.
isn't. So for me, in my case, even if like I could never actually use it because it's like
Sure.
basically almost sitting, not quite sitting in my lap, but it's not far from it. So
As far as flexibility, you did mention that there is vertical lens shift, but not horizontal. So that gives you some flexibility in positioning, but
correct.
maybe not as much as you would love. And then you mentioned that the difference between the Pro 2 and this one is focus is more refined. You found that a little easier to work with on focus?
Yeah, the focus was tighter on this one. It was well, one, it was tighter and it was smoother. It seemed like it had a little bit more precision. I'm not sure if that was a change in like a firmware or like what they did to make it different, but focus was better on this one overall. And not that the Pro 2 has an issue focusing, it was just too coarse, where
Right.
this was a little bit more granular.
And one of the things you spend a lot of time talking about, which I'd love for you to dive into, is the 6-level iris system. And you mentioned that as a pro, is the added iris. Can you talk about how the idea of an iris on a projector? I can picture the mechanical aspect of an iris like a camera,
Mhm.
um, helps to enhance contrast
Yeah.
in each of these stages.
Yeah. So when you have anything like that in like the optical path of light, you're basically clamping it down. So you are reducing the overall um, light that's coming out of it. So when you do that, the byproduct is that you basically get more contrast, but you also reduce the luminance of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it works. And they have basically off. Um, I think it was Cinema 1, Cinema 2, and then manual. And from how it seemed, at least from like measurements and just like visually how it looked, it seems like I think it was Cinema 1 matched Iris 3, and Cinema 2 matched Iris 6, or like it seemed like it was more like 6, but it was a little less. So maybe it's kind of in between 5 and 6. Um, and that's just like quickly looking at it and then like doing a few like measurements. That's what it seemed to be.
So the picture modes, it seems like, are kind of being created partially by the iris setting.
Yeah. So if you choose
Yeah,
the Iris setting of Cinema 1, that's basically equating to like Iris 3, Iris setting of
uh-huh.
3.
Yeah.
And then like Cinema 2 would be like 6 ish, somewhere around there.
Right.
Um, so you could just choose one of those, or you can just choose it manually. It seemed like kind of like the sweet spot for the Iris um, is going to be between 2 and 4, just
Mhm.
based off of user preference. Um, that's where you're going to kind of get the most amount of light and a decent bump in contrast. So it definitely worked. Um, so I mean, it's a nice benefit, but I think it's also one of those things where if someone were going to buy this and they wanted to get as much light out of it as possible, and if someone were not going to use the lens shift, they're better off buying the Pro 2 at a significantly less cost. So it's interesting because it is a benefit over the Pro 2, but if you're not going to use those, you're honestly better off just getting the Pro 2 and saving money. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, so it's like their biggest competition is actually kind of themselves.
Right. Okay. And then how does the enhanced black level feature fit into that equation?
So what their EBL does is basically laser dimming. Um,
Hmm.
so, well, first of all, even if you have it turned off, it automatically dims anyways. Like if you feed it a black signal, it just somewhat dims. That's why there's a difference between like full on, full off and single pixel. So if it handled single pixel properly, there'd be no difference between just sending it full black and then putting on a single pixel. It would measure the same in terms of contrast, but it doesn't. So what it does is when you have a certain amount of content on screen, either based off of like APL, I generally probably based off of APL, what it does is going to start to dim the laser, and it will help increase your overall perceived contrast. So your black 4 will measure lower. So if you have EBL off and you send it pure, like a pure black, it's going to measure one thing. And if you turn on EBL, it's going to get a little bit lower because it dims it lower. And if you turn it on high, it goes down a little bit lower as well. So when you start using a combination of EBL and the iris, you can get pretty high contrast out of it for what it is, but it's not anywhere near the spec that they claim, like at all.
Okay. And and then to further, I don't know, complicate it or just add like layers of how do you make it perform at its best? You've got, support for Dolby Vision and HDR10 plus formats along with Valerian's own dynamic tone mapping. So how do those elements kind of fit into the equation? What's their performance like?
The performance was generally good. It behaves very much like the Pro 2.
Hmm.
The biggest thing that I noticed is that there's a lot of it still has a color shift when you do things like ABL, and it still has a lot of clipping of highlights, like a lot of clipping, and it doesn't handle like really high nit content well without clipping. Dolby Vision does a little bit better with it. HDR, when you start using like the EBL and the tone mapping and so on and so forth, it's noticeable. Like it's a noticeable hit in performance, I guess you would say, or at least picture quality, because you'll see like it could be a light off of someone's face, and instead of being like clearly defined, it's clipped. It's really blown out. For instance, um, Dolby Vision did well. HDR10 Plus did well as also. Using any of them is going to give you a good picture. I would say probably more so Dolby Vision. Um, but they're all roughly pretty good. Like you're not going to get a bad image out of it. Um, I think the biggest issue is the clipping and the color shifting. Like that still happens, and that can happen in honestly almost anything that you're using. So
Yeah. Kind of to wrap up some of the details here, you've got, you know, audio, obviously, as a lifestyle projector, you want to be able to have some audio performance out of it. It's going to be a free, standalone device as opposed to connecting it to your audio system. Um, can you just comment a little bit on the performance there on the audio?
so the audio was good. Again, it's not a replacement for like a dedicate, whether even like a sound bar.
Oh yeah.
It's not going to replace that. It has a good clarity, um, decent mid range, not what I would really consider a lot of bass, um, but it's sufficient. Where if you're using it in a small room, you'll be fine. If you were using it in a temporary setup, you're definitely fine. But if you want a more immersive experience, you will still want to pair it with some type of audio system.
Hmm. So you've got support for DTS:X and Dolby Atmos as well as the eARC for that soundbar. So you've got some flexibility there for dedicated external sound as well.
Correct.
And then we didn't mention that it runs on Google TV with Android TV OS 12. This is becoming pretty much the standard operating system for lifestyle projectors.
Yeah. So
Okay.
a lot of things have always used Google TV or prior what might have been called Android TV. But in terms of this particular version, it seems like this is basically kind of like the standard right now. So whether it be a lifestyle, whether it be a UST, if it's running Google TV, chances are it's going to be running that OS version, which is good because that OS version has fixed a lot of issues that used to show up prior, where like it maybe didn't handle color spaces correctly, or it
Mm,
didn't have separate memories for SDR and HDR, and that seems to really be addressed with this one. I mean, there could be a
okay.
few outliers, but this is by far the more mature um, implementation of it, so it works actually pretty well.
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention two very popular categories within the reviews, and that's the gaming capabilities, so latency, and the ever popular trolling category of 3D. So you touched on both of those in your testing. Can you just kind of give us a little touch on what you said there in those two categories?
Yeah, so I mean, for this not to be like a dedicated gaming projector, um, it performs extremely well. Like it has very low latency, and it depends on how you set it up. Like in some picture modes, you have to only use like DLP turbo. Some you have to use like high refresh rate mode and DLP turbo. I think probably one thing that people tend to get it confused about when it comes to this projector is the 4K 120. Um, so, and this is so basically how it works. You can send this projector 4K 120. It's in the EDIT. It will accept it. You can send it. Um, However, it downsamples and it will output as 4K 60. So it does not output 4K 120. It will accept 4K 120. For people that are confused, the reason that this is important is because depending on what you are playing on, so like myself, I generally play on PC, but let's say you're playing on a PlayStation, you might have what they might have like their quality mode or performance mode. Now, when you run those type of modes, what will happen is depending on how, and this is all going to be dependent on the game. This is not a blanket statement, but what will generally happen is you can choose to do something in, let's say, 4K 120. That directly affects the render of what it's sending in terms of the graphics or the visual fidelity. So if you could choose to send something 1080p 120 or a render where you might choose 4K 120 and it might render it at 1440p or 1800p, you are starting off with a better asset. So even though it does not output 4K 120, it's still beneficial to be able to select it. Like that's how it works.
Okay.
So yeah, even though it doesn't do 4K 120 on the output and it downsamples to 4K 60, it is good that you have the option to send it 4K 120.
Sure.
But I mean, overall, it has very low latency.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 12 milliseconds for like 1080p 120. And if you send it 4K 120, it's like 18 if you send it 4K 60 or 1080p 60. If you have something that you can send 240 hertz, it's like 5 milliseconds. So that's actually really good. That's better than most projectors out there outside of maybe a few like dedicated gaming projectors. And most dedicated gaming projectors don't perform at this level. So,
and for 3D, you tried out. You watched Tron Legacy in 3D. Said it was
yeah.
good imagery. Didn't have any issues with that. Good depth.
If I recall correctly, because I was reviewing a lot of projectors
Mm-hmm.
around at that actual time, I don't think I really actually had any problems out of it. It definitely had a bright image. It wasn't as bright as, say, the XGIMI Ultra,
Mm-hmm.
or was it 20? Yeah, the 20. It's not as bright as that, but it gives you a very bright image, a good clean image. And the glasses that I used were the Valerion glasses.
Oh, okay.
So, and they weren't as dark as some of like
Okay.
the other glasses I have. So
Mm-hmm.
you got a good amount of light through it. And so it has a very pleasant like 3D experience.
Yeah, you said the overall brightness was good with the laser setting at 10.
Yeah.
And then the other kind of feature that you mentioned within that is no visible crosstalk. So that's not always the case with 3D.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll get crosstalk depending on what unit it is. It's rare nowadays, but yeah, I didn't experience any when I was viewing it.
Okay. So I guess just to wrap up, any final thoughts in terms of way that you want to describe the price point versus performance, so that value proposition, and just overall feelings about this particular Valerion VisionMaster Max projector.
I guess it's kind of going through different changes. I guess there's always like slightly different firmwares and
Mm-hmm.
slight changes to performance. So there, I think if you got it early and you got it for like early promotions at the different price points that they had set, you got a great deal. Like 100%, you got a great deal. Um, at $5,000 is still good. It's still very good. Um, I would say still its biggest competition is the Pro 2. So people that don't need the uh, iris, who are just going to leave it full open to get as much brightness as possible. People who are going to not use the lens shift, the Pro 2 is more than sufficient. Um, Now, if you need one of those features, then the Max makes a lot more sense. Um, in terms of some of their specs, it's so one of the things I noticed with the Valerian is when it first announced, I swear I recall that they said that the Max was only going to be 15,000 to 1. And then it changed to 30,000 to 1. And then it changed to 50,000 to 1. Um, this is not a 50,000 to 1 projector. So maybe they were basing it off of it having a dynamic iris. But this is more of a 30,000 to 1, depending on how you set it up. So don't expect this to be a 50,000 to 1 contrast ratio projector, because it's not.
Okay.
But price to performance is good. Once people start looking at doing things with the interchangeable lens, the price is going to obviously get up there. Then it's going to kind of become a different discussion because of the price point that you're sitting at with competition at that price point. But I would say for what it is right now at that price point, it is one of the better projectors that you can get. But at the same time, you still have to be able to accommodate its throw, because it's not a long throw projector. So if you can accommodate its throw and you need the lens shift and you're going to use the iris, it's a very good choice. It really is a really good choice of a projector. It performs really well.
Yeah. So the lens shift and the lens option is very that could the lens option could add quite a bit of price to that $5,000, because lenses are not an inexpensive add-on, right?
Right. So I don't think they released the price as to what it's going to be yet. And as for the release date, I want to say it's maybe early next year or the first quarter of next year.
Okay.
But in terms of price, I don't even know what it's going to cost.
Yeah,
but
we might find out more at CES. That seems like something they might be premiering there. But and just to clarify for those who don't want to have to look it up and aren't already huge fans of the Pro 2, that's more of a $3,000 unit at full MSRP, and then and of course the Max is $5,000. So $2,000 difference for this upgrade to the Max. So.
That's why I was saying if someone's not going to use those two features, they are better off getting a Pro 2. Right. But if they're going to use either one, then the Max is worth it, because it is better. It does perform better. But it's, again, if you're not using those features, it being better is better worth $2,000 is the question that they have to answer. Exactly.
Well, I appreciate your time, Sammie. We're going to wrap it up there. I know you've got some other, we've got, like you mentioned, the XGME Horizon 20 Max in the queue here, ready to be posted soon. And we're working on getting some other models in as well. So you're going to stay busy through the end of the year, and we're going to talk again about some other reviews that have posted. So we'll talk again, but thank you so much for your time. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.
Sammie Prescott lives in Colorado Springs, where he is a QA software engineer, ISF level 3 professional calibrator, and frequent reviewer, of course, at projectorcentral.com, where you can read all of his reviews. And that wraps up today's show, which was produced by Projector Central. Please subscribe to the Projector Podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Also, check out all the latest Projector product news and reviews at Projector Central, where you can also subscribe to receive email notifications about our articles on the day that they are posted. For Sammie Prescott and Projector Central, I'm Jeremy Glowacki. Thanks for listening.